So in this, obviously, I'm not Wayne for this one either. My name is Taylor Johnson, Chief Performance Engineer of StateSpace, and with us we have some awesome panelists talking about scouting, coaching, analytics. If you all could just introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Ridgway. I go by Ashes, and I am the coach of NRG's Gears of War team. We are one of the most dominant teams in console esports history, winning 20 out of 22 events that we've attended.
I'm JP Krez. I'm the data analyst for the New York Subliners' new CDL franchise for New York. Previously, I was a stats producer for MLG at their Call of Duty broadcasts.
Jacob Troba, lead analyst and assistant coach for the Minnesota Rocker. Was a professional player, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, went into finance, and now I'm back in esports.
I'm Brian St. Borrasca. I'm the head coach for the new Minnesota Rocker Call of Duty franchise. I'm a former professional player as well.
Awesome. So we all jumped on a call like a couple weeks ago or last week, and so let's just jump right into it again. So in the world of analytics, we're talking about gameplay and looking at film, and players, and stats. What's working? What's not? What are some things you wish you could do?
Yeah,
Who wants to kick it off?
I'll let you guys start.
Yeah, I don't mind taking this one. So what are some things we're doing? Unfortunately, right now, a lot of it's hand tracking and aggregating data ourselves. JP was fortunate enough for, I guess, the last year or two to be able to receive sort of back-end data. Unfortunately, that's not something we've been given this year yet. Something hopefully we can see moving forward. It's a lot of tracking individual player stats, team stats, opposing statistics, and then we'll get more granular and look at specific events or specific hills, specific points in a game, and just break down situations that we see commonly occurring. That's what I do mainly, JP.
Yeah, basically the same thing. I've dabbled in some like computer vision to try and detect when different scores are happening or different points in the game, what's happening. For the most part, you see in a lot of computer games like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, you get these data feeds directly after the match ends. It's a lot easier on the PC side from my experience, and it really is on the onus of the publisher to really give us access to that data. I was fortunate enough when I was working as a stats producer and helping the broadcast to receive some of that data from a third party that was working with Activision directly with Call of Duty stats. And you can see you can get so much amount of data within such a small amount of time after the match ends. I'm talking like 15 seconds. You'd have everything that happened in the game, X, Y, Z data, positions of when someone killed another player, what weapon they were using, what time, any specific thing you really wanted to have. So when you're talking about the difference between a traditional sports where you have to have players wearing specific things on their equipment or cameras set up around the stadium, here in video games it's all tracked inside of the game already. So it's just getting that data and extracting it and trying to use that as much as possible to get a competitive edge over another team.
I guess that's our biggest roadblock right now is trying to figure out how to correctly extract it, right?
Yeah.
Something hopefully the developers can help us with.
Want to talk a little bit about the data you're looking at as well?
Yeah, sure. So for my game for Gears of War, it's a little bit more rudimentary where we're getting just basic things like how many kills a player has, how many times they died, and what their score was overall throughout the map. And so as a coach, when I look at this information, I have a spreadsheet that I use, again, very basic, that will help me kind of get a visual representation of all these numbers. Because a lot of the players that I work with aren't necessarily people who want to look at numbers. I'm the nerdy one on the team. They're the ones who like to just be really good with their thumbs. So I try to give them a graph or a line that they can see where they can kind of compete with each other. So they'll see somebody's line is a little bit better than somebody else's line, and now they're kind of competing internally to improve themselves and build that kind of, it builds a bond as well as makes them just like driven to be better players individually. So I like taking those numbers, things that these guys kind of find, and using that to help push them to be better individual players.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about more on that, right? So when you take these analytics, you take these numbers, how are you having those conversations with the players and how are you conveying that information? Because obviously the conversation is really important. So how are you going about that where it can land for them or kind of getting in their world?
Sure. So we have scheduled practice times like any traditional sport. My players know weeks in advance, what days they need to be on, what times they need to be on those days. And before we actually start our practice day, once a week, I'll kind of break down the stats from the last week and give them the updated numbers and kind of reignite that little competition I was mentioning. So I'll tell them, hey, who do you guys think is the best when we get ready to play this map called Asylum? Who do you guys think is the best player? And they'll start guessing, oh yeah, it's definitely me. I'm really good at that map. And it sparks, again, that little competition. And then I let them know, I show them the numbers, I show them the graphs. And for some players, it can kind of give them that realization of, wait, I thought I was performing better than the numbers are actually showing for me on this map. So maybe I need to look at how I'm playing and kind of refigure out maybe I'm positioning wrong, maybe I'm just not looking the right direction, but how can I participate and increase my numbers to make them represent how I feel I'm actually playing?
Yeah, I like looking at other team stats a lot too, because you kind of need to see not only where your team is strong and where your team is weak, but you need to find out your opponent's weaknesses as well. And with Call of Duty going the whole franchising model, we know who we're playing and when we're playing months in advance. So we are able to scout every team we're playing, take their statistics, and kind of use those to, give us any edge we can get. Any like 1% advantage, like 0.5% advantage, just anything that can help at all is what we're looking for to help us, in our veto process and, in preparation going into a match against, X team.
Yeah. I think in terms of presentation, which I guess was something you touched on in the question, I try to make it as interactive as possible. So like I'll have a final outputs page, almost like a one-pager of all the results I'll find on a particular team and sort of format it in a visually appealing way so it's easy to follow. But then I also have particular models that I've built out so players could go in themselves and select specific characteristics they want to search for, and then it's interactive with charts. So there's the visual aid that you sort of touched on. And I guess, JP, when we were on the call, you sort of said.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with the interactive model just because, you can show a player or a coach numbers and they might understand it, they might not, and might not influence their decision at all. But if you give them something that, like an application or something that they can play with and see, graphs or numbers with, pretty colors or something like that, then I'll be more inclined to influence their decision in something. And that's basically our job, to try and make that, convey any type of benefit or something that we can get from those numbers and give that to a coach or a player and have them, utilize that as much as their ability.
Easy to understand.
Yeah, a lot of these players are like visual learners in the first place because they are staring at a screen and like playing a game that they're looking at and running around and they're learning things by like looking at the game. So having visual statistics helps a lot in that regard.
Definitely. So when you're, so Brian, let's start with you on this one. So when you're mapping out your opponents and you're looking at different data and analytics, kind of what's going through your mind without giving away your special sauce and kind of the preparation, but in thinking about that, then also knowing people who are watching may want to do the same sort of tactics. What are some things you're kind of working through in your mind?
I mean, you basically have to look at all the data and kind of see how your team's been doing and how the other team's been doing as well. These teams will have maps in their pool that they're stronger at and that they're weaker at. You kind of need to go and find a balance and hit a point where like your net positive is more so than their net positive, because teams will match up and they'll have maps that they're both very good at. So you kind of want to force them into picking that map rather than you picking it.
So now, with talking to the players with these game plans, like how is that conversation? Because we talked earlier about with the franchising model, the conversations turned a little bit differently now than it has been in the past. Can we kind of talk about the dynamics between coach, analyst, player?
Yeah,
Anyone wants to kick it off?
For our game, for Gears, we're not franchised, so we don't have the same external structure. It's, coach is almost considered a sixth member of the team rather than a management staff. So I can't speak exactly as to what these guys are going to be experiencing, but I know for us and for several other esports, there is kind of just a mutual respect that's built between the players and the coach. And that kind of understanding of, as a coach, I know that there's going to be times where my players know a situation better than I'm going to know it, or they might see something that I might not, or that I, may miss. So being able to communicate clearly with each other and get points across and just have a constructive environment rather than trying to butt heads or force my way as the only right way seems to be working really well. But you guys have a different experience for sure.
Yeah, I also think it sort of depends on the coach. So every relationship, every player to coach relationship is going to be different. Like Matthew Pothoff earlier this morning sort of touched on, like there's so many different types of coaches. There's the emotional coach who is sort of there to keep everyone in check emotionally. Then there's the strategic coach who is really breaking down gameplay. So I think it also depends sort of which type of coach you have looking over your team. But yeah, franchising has shifted the coaching dynamic drastically. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I mean, with Call of Duty especially, I mean, it's like young players. The oldest players in the scene are, 20, 26, 27. And a lot of people, are still like learning to be adults and learning how to take criticism and, and give it. So you kind of need to be a little loose. If you're very strict and, harsh on these players, they're kind of going to start resenting you. So you need to have that mutual level of respect so you're constantly giving feedback in a, productive manner.
Yeah, and I mean, I've only been an analyst for the past month once, franchising started. But honestly, the players have been really receptive of, numbers and stuff like that. I honestly didn't really expect it to be like this right at the beginning. The players, they have egos, obviously, and they'll like to see, themselves doing well on specific maps and, having a high KD on a specific versus a specific team. But when you show them, the negative numbers, it's not always, taken too well. And honestly, creating a relationship with them first and having them understand the numbers in an overall sense is one of the big things that I'm trying to, talk to them about and create a relationship with them about.
And at the end of the day, all of these players, their main goal is to win and to be the best in the world, right? So they, when presented the right information, when presented the numbers that these guys can gather and the strategy or just even the emotional support that coaches can bring, they know that that's only going to help them achieve that goal of being the best. And once you kind of build that connection of like, look, I'm just here to help you be the absolute best that you can be, then they start being way more receptive to feedback that you might give, numbers that you might show them, and just all around being that ideal player as a coach that we look for.
So, Nick, your roster's been together for quite some time, right?
Yes.
How long total?
The core three and myself have been together for about 3 to 4 years.
Right. So what I'd like to do now is kind of touch on team dynamics. So we have new teams kind of get formed together, the chemistry around that. But let's kind of start with the team that's been together for 3-4 years. Like, what's that been like? What have been some key insights from that kind of dynamic?
Yeah. So I joined the team in September of 2015. And it was kind of just a lucky situation where I joined on with some young guys that I saw potential in, and I shifted more into a coaching role when I saw that was a void that needed to be filled. And from there, we found success by building this kind of brotherhood. And I know that sounds like really cliche, like, oh, your teammates are your brothers, but it became really true for us. We knew that we could talk to each other in harsh ways like brothers can. The ways that you would talk to your siblings might not be the way that you would talk to a coworker, but that strong relationship really helps push that understanding of we're here to support each other. And so we found that over the years and the experiences, we've traveled all over the world together, that understanding with each other and, our mindsets towards, we just want to be the best. We want to continue to be the best. We found a lot of success in just, whenever we've had to make a roster change, identifying people who would buy into that concept. Not just a really talented player, not somebody who can communicate really well, but somebody who can be the complete package and fit into this family, so to speak. So we found players who almost mix with us in our personalities whenever we had to make a roster change. That was more important than whoever might be the most skilled player that was on the market. And we're lucky enough to be one of the best teams in the world. So it's everybody wants to join our team. So we have that kind of going for us.
For the Call of Duty side, specifically, once CDL franchised, pretty much every player was a free agent. So it was on me and my head coach to basically try and find 5 players that we think would be, a contending roster. And I know I'm a numbers guy, but one of the big things that we took away from it is that we wanted the players that had chemistry with each other or had played with each other before, because it's a very, very relationship-based sport, if you want to say that. If you talk about baseball, it's pretty individual. You have a pitcher and catcher every play, but you don't have like a team dynamic sort of when you're talking about things like baseball or basketball or hockey. But when you're talking about esports, you only have 5 players on a team, and chemistry is very, very important. Even communication is one of the biggest things in esports, just because of how much information you need to relay to your teammates compared to when you talk about traditional sports. So chemistry was one of the main factors for us when we were trying to build our roster.
Yeah, I mean, if there's like one crack in that bond between the players, it's going to bring the whole team down. Everyone needs to be synergized and, on the same page and on the same wavelength. And, if you just have one person bringing that down, it affects the entire team as a whole. So you kind of need to get 5 players that all build in and, buy into the same mindset that you can just constantly improve every day, like as a group and, not as individuals. Because it's a team game and these players are like working and playing together like 8 to 12 hours a day. So like, if they don't want to be working and playing with these other players, it's just gonna make everything crumble.
Yeah, and you've seen that sort of historically through Call of Duty, is there'll be these super teams with really good players, right? And then something happens and they stop winning, and then you ask yourself what happened, and you go behind the scenes and you realize that there were just massive personality clashes. And it seems like the biggest downfall for these really successful teams are players no longer getting along. So making sure that we were picking up players who
put their personal egos aside.
Right. 1, put their personal egos aside. 2, have had some type of interaction with each other in a playing capacity before. Because everyone can be friends when you're not playing, but then when your money's on the line and you're in a tough situation, you kind of want to know how everyone's going to treat each other. So it's cool that you and Bobble, who's the head coach, sort of took that into account.
Awesome. Do we have any questions from anybody out there? Yes.
I guess when you find that the chemistry isn't there, how do you approach the situation with like either trying to get the chemistry flowing, or do you see like just yank that person out, or I guess it depends on the scenario?
So I'll repeat the question. So if you notice the chemistry's off with your players and the rosters, what are some things that you go about to handle and manage that?
I mean, players' initial reaction when a situation like that arises, okay, let's get rid of this player now, but it's not always so easy because, we have these big contracts and everything this year, and a lot of players are like locked in the big deals, so you can't just freely get rid of someone, as how you used to in the past. So you kind of need to work things out, talk together as a team and, just have good, productive talks, and if you aren't able to work through the problems, rationally and reasonably, then you have to start looking, potentially swapping this player out and get someone who's going to, buy in better.
Right. It's pretty cliche, I guess, but team building exercises really do help. It's hard to find players that are willing to buy into that. But even something as simple as we're fortunate, right? Because out in Minnesota, all of our players are actually moving out there to practice side by side with one another. But previously, that wasn't the case except for a select few teams. And sometimes you see that you'd fight a lot if you're practicing strictly online. But then once a team moves in together and they're going out to dinner with one another, when they're off the game, they're watching TV together, it sort of builds a friendship, almost like the brotherhood that you spoke to, where now having someone yell at you because you messed something up, you're less sensitive toward it, and you just accept that they're not yelling because they dislike you, but because they really want to make the situation better. So obviously there's different ways to fix the problem, but if it remains a problem, then it's something that management tries to fix.
Yeah, I mean, when you get in arguments online, people like have the option to just mute their microphone and just completely mute that person out. So when something like that happens in person, I mean, you're not gonna be able to just flick a switch and just mute the person. You actually have to hear them out and hear their whole side of the story.
And I think a lot of these arguments take place because there's obviously a lot of the in-game stressors and the frustrations that come with handling and dealing with a loss, or even if the results are a win but they're not as good as you expected. And I've noticed that a lot of players that I've worked with, they might have a harsh reaction immediately after where there's still a lot of high emotions. But when it calms down, I'll hear them go, look, I'm not yelling at you because I'm mad at you. I'm yelling at you because I know you're the best person in the game other than me, and I want to see that from you. And so kind of seeing that, again, like I use the word brotherhood, where they're really trying to push each other to be the best. It's something kind of special to see. You know, I've been in traditional sports as a kid, and it's definitely just a different environment seeing this from, you know, gamers and this passion that they have for what they do.
Definitely. I think the communication's key, right? It's how you approach the conversation. It's how you approach the culture, right? Because really it starts at the top of the culture, which then sets the tone for everything that follows. Yes?
Yes, I wanted to ask about how you help players train mentally. There's been a lot of talk today about, you know, physical training, skill, now kind of team interaction, strategy, but there are other kind of mental cognitive skills that need to be trained. And reacting to what you guys were just saying, things like emotion regulation, stress regulation, but also sustained concentration and sustained attention that people are playing for hours on end, you know, and day after day or match after match. What do the players do, and how do you help them train those? Those are skills that transfer to everything for traditional sports as well as esports.
So the question is, how are you helping players train these mental skills and cognitive skills for emotional regulation and all these other sort of things?
Yes. So for me personally, I have a degree in psychology and social science. It was just the subject that I found fascinating and I felt could transfer over into esports when, you know, I was in that big mystery of what do I do in college. And so I found that kind of study of, you know, human behavior has really helped me when working with these guys, these young guys from all different backgrounds. I mean, one of them lives in the Bronx, one of them lives in California. There are different cultures. There are different, you know, diversities included into this team. So, you know, these mental stressors that you're mentioning and dealing with those, a lot of it is really good communication and being able to give them a place where, you know, I can talk to them outside of a team environment. I can talk to them one-on-one and let them vent or let them, you know, just break down whatever is, you know, the struggle that they're dealing with. Because a lot of it, you know, it's just feeling like there's this pressure that they can't communicate it, that they have to be tough and the best and strong. And a lot of times, you know, there's stuff that's just stressful and, you know, crap that we have to deal with outside of the game. So being able to give them a place where they feel comfortable to talk, they can just kind of let loose, blow off steam. I can send them, you know, different, whether it be like meditation kind of exercises or just different things that help mental health, yoga, things like that, that can give them out of game, away from the stress, practice of just calming their mind really seems to be effective.
Yeah, I think players also need to, you know, disconnect from the game every now and then because players will be playing, you know, 12 plus hours a day. Just taking that time to get out, you know, go out, have some fun with your teammates outside of the game goes a long way because when you're just constantly just gaming all day, every day, it's going to stress you out because you're going to want to be the best at your job. If you're putting in that much time and something goes wrong, it's just going to stress you out even more.
All of the pro teams this year actually agreed to an off day, which I think is new to Call of Duty,
Yeah, it's
right?
really nice.
Yeah, so now, well, I guess not all of them, but very few teams practice on Sundays. If they do, players are more than welcome to get on and just get individual reps or play pickup games, but you're seeing teams dedicating Sunday to mental days and being able to take a break, which players are really appreciating.
Yeah, that's why there was a lot of burnout in the past. When you're playing 7 days a week, every single week, and you know, you have like maybe like 2 off days a year, like excluding the off season, it's going to cause a lot of burnout and a lot of stress.
Awesome. And I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
So, sort of like a two-part question. So, as analysts, what would you say is the difference between the analysis that's done on a professional level and on sort of like the more casual level, like what we see online, like, you know, Mobalytics or like OP.gg? And also, what is the difference between analytics on the individual player level and on the team level?
So the question is, what's the difference in the analytics between the pro side and the amateur side, and then also looking at the analytics for the player versus the team?
To go for your first question, the difference between, you know, the pro and casual level, I think a lot of it stems from scrimmage VOD, like video of practices. I think analyzing that and detecting, you know, certain weaknesses or strengths that you have versus other professional teams. You know, when you're playing as a casual player and you're solo queuing, it's very different because you're not playing, you know, with your entire team. When you're playing professionally in a scrimmage against another professional team that you're going to be playing at an official LAN for money, it's very different because you're going to see how they're going to play, and they're going to see how you're going to play, and you're going to have to adapt to whatever changes might happen in between then and your official match. So I think using video is something that's going to be the future of using esports analytics.
Awesome, and I apologize. We have to stop there. Thank you all very much. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you.